Okay, good. Okay. I've been studying my water. Clear as mud. Anyway.
Tested. Like they tested.
There might, yes, there might be. I brought my water bill even. Not the laundry one. Oh, that's like paying.
We wouldn't even want to know.
Yeah, that's like paying national debt.
Oh, my God.
As Alan can well attest to in the hotel. Okay, here we are.
You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm prepared.
I'm gonna share my screen, I think. Oh,
Oh, I don't do screens.
can you enable me to share screen? Okay, so just wanted to kind of start the conversation about the water utility and the rates. We had several meetings late last fall and I think one or maybe two earlier this year, kind of talking about the rates. And at that time, we kind of put a pin in it and thinking we'd come back to it. And so here we are. The main thing is when I'm looking at the water rate and kind of what we want to accomplish with the water rate, it's to fully fund the operations and maintenance of the utility. Build and preserve an appropriate reserve. Now we can kind of talk about what that appropriate reserve is. Typically, and what I've recommended is 90 days worth of cash, which is 90 days worth of the expenditures that we would have, plus about $250,000 worth of reserve, kind of emergency reserve. That's a lot of times, I know when you talk to auditors, that 90 days of cash is kind of a minimum. If they would like to see, they really talk about even 6 months worth of cash. And for me, I think we kind of balance it. We have 90 days worth of cash plus a little bit for an emergency type of project or something that would come up. Paying debt service. So if we take out bonds to do a larger project, that would be paid for with the rate for the water utility. And then fund future capital plan projects. So basically making sure that we're planning for the financial future of those projects as well. And so those are kind of, when I'm looking at what we need for a rate, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about the rate. And we can kind of talk through those if if you got a question of why this versus that. But I just want to make sure that it was understood what my frame of reference when I'm talking about this. So this is a very similar presentation that we had. I think it was in February. It's kind of based off of that memo. I updated a few of the slides, but I would just kind of walk through those, kind of talking about, if you look at this, this has the actual revenue in blue and expenditures in red, except for 2021 and 2022 years. Those are the budget years. Those are kind of the budget numbers. And that includes, we have a kind of a target reserve, about $750,000 on there. And you can see that our cash on hand in the beginning of the year is pretty close to zero, nowhere near that reserve target. And then our kind of net income from year to year is just kind of hovers right around the zero mark, which means we basically don't end up with a lot of room to say, okay, now we want to start planning for a capital project. We don't have that capacity with how our utility's been performing. And the average net income is $7,232. And that's kind of shown in this slide. It just, there again, it's the revenues in blue, expenditures in red, but that green shows you where that net income is and how it just kind of oscillates there on zero with the that 2010 2020 average been $7,232. So we really never gained any ground towards building reserve and some of that capital savings that we probably need to be thinking about. Any questions so far? Again, this is kind of the same information, just a different way to look at it. The bars kind of show what that cash on hand at the beginning of each of those years it was, and then where the target reserve is. And then I just ran a trend line on our cash on hand. You see that trend line's it descends just a little bit, but it's basically flat. I mean, we're not really building any reserve. We're not really losing any right at this point.
And that target reserve, that's 750,000, is that correct?
Yeah.
In 2010 and 2016, were those dry years or something, or do you know why those were so much higher than all the others?
Have to look back. I don't know as far as the consumption stuff that I have not gone back to 2010. I've just gone back to 2016. We'll look a little bit at that. But I'm not sure what was. So if you look, basically 2014 or 2013, we lost money because 2014's cash on hand is lower. So we lost money in 13, 14, and then in 15, we actually made some money. That's why it went up. It's less than what that trend line is. So, and I don't know. I guess I have not put that on two. I haven't put layered on top of that. Like, was there a rate increase at that time? Maybe in 15 there was a rate increase. So in 16 we had a little bit of revenue increase. I don't know what I haven't looked at that historical timing of rate increases.
Had rate increases most years, except last year we did we? And most years we raised it a penny or 2 pennies, something like
that. Next graph, that's really just showing when you look at the budget for the water utility, it is 73% of that budget. These are budgeted numbers. These aren't actuals. The budgeted numbers are tied to that purchase of water. And when you kind of look at just what we kind of budget for O&M, which is kind of like the contractual stuff, the supplies and capital outlay, we're looking at $312,000 that we roughly budget for that. When you don't, not count personnel, just kind of being able to go out and do some projects or smaller projects. That's all we're using to maintain our systems. This graph, basically, this gets into that kind of consumption. So 16 looks like we had a little higher consumption. So that's probably why you go back to the other slide, you see a pretty big jump between 16 and 17. So this jump here might be tied to consumption because 16 was pretty high. So you end up with more money at the beginning of 17 because you sold more. This year we're down a little bit. That kind of looking at that, you know, and that's the other thing when you kind of look at the rate, trying to think of what kind of consumption that we're going to see and setting the rate. So then at the rate that we assume that we're going to sell, or the amount that we're going to sell and the rate that we charge gets us the revenue that we need for utility. I would, looking at this and looking at 19, 20, and 21, I would probably I would think our consumption that we would use is probably closer to maybe what we're seeing in and what we saw in 20 and what we might see this year, because that average is about 3 million gallons more than what we've seen in the last couple of years. And then again, that can all change if we get a really dry year. That may really change that. This graph basically just kind of shows you that breakdown of like where does the water go. So we have about half the water that we consume or that is sold is tied to residential usage, third to commercial, and the rest is kind of split up between what we do industrial wise, rural water district, and country club.
What agreement do we have with the country club?
They get, I believe it is, they pay 7% of our current rate per 100 gallon. I've got that here in another spreadsheet, but it's a reduced charge because it's coming straight from the lake. It's not treated. I think is partly why that was.
It's coming from Lake Iowa.
It's pumped from Lake Iowa. Now, I there again, that's one of those that I haven't dived into the total cost of what it takes us to pump that water to the country club and the ability of us to, that infrastructure itself, those pumps and everything have been out there for a while. They don't get a lot of TLC. And so that's something that may end up being a big cost item that we may not recover from what we sell to the country club.
Did they give us a right of way, some of that to get to Rockwood?
There is an agreement, that was part of some of that, is there's an agreement, but I think what I have seen, there was a letter, I think, remember the date, that they were, here's what your rate's gonna be, and we will do what we can to supply you water as long as we can, but what my thought is that was probably intended that if those pumps go out, we're not gonna spend 20 grand on new pumps to get water there.
Our arrangement with them was that we would take them into the city limits. This was back in 2004, 2005. We take the country club into the city limits. If we could run our water and sewer lines across the country club out to Rockwood.
I knew we had some
But-
agreement with it.
At one time, I thought they were getting their money for getting the water from Bull Creek.
It comes from Lake Iowa, I think.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that's pumped directly from Lake Iowa to.
And
They
they're
kinda got- they've got like a
responsible for
pond
the
that it
pumps.
pumps
I mean, we
into.
aren't gonna pay for those pumps.
Right, well, we have, I don't know that we've done a lot of maintenance on those pumps, but I do think that's something that in the future, one of those pumps could go down and then our ability to pump water to them may be diminished, or we may not be able to do it at all depending on the situation. So that would be a conversation of, okay, who pays, do we still keep that? Do we still sell the water? And then if so, who pays for those repairs?
Seems like we ought to do that before something happens.
Well, and we can, I think that's revisiting that conversation. So the rest, I'm gonna kind of cut to a different, and it's not showing. Share. Just- Can't get to one without getting the other one and let me do it. So. So this is a graph that I think you've seen that, we put that you've seen this before, but it's basically just kind of showing the cash flow. And there's this yellow line is the 2021 cash flow. And then the dotted yellow line is what is projected based on 3-year trends on what we've done in those months that we don't have in there yet. As you can see, our cash on hand has dropped pretty significantly. I think we've got a little less usage this year that we've seen, more so than in previous years. Now, with this, based on the 3-year projections, this kind of levels itself out a little bit, and we still end up, we maybe lose a little more money than what we had planned, but we're not going to be as bad off as what will be a little higher than the $23,000. I think that also kind of, I think a contingency plan is I know we have that money and we put in funds 15 that we have there for some capital things. We may want to think that if we don't do something soon and we need to balance, we can use some of that money knowing we need to pay it back. But that helps us with this fund. We saw dips last year. It dipped in August of this year, which it usually starts leveling out in August. So we've been watching it pretty close and seeing what is happening with that fund. But like I said, this is why we need to adjust that rate so we can have some cushion when we have fluctuations with that. Right now, we're 2/3 of the way through the year. Our revenue is at 50% of what we had budgeted. Our expenditures is at 55%. So our expenditures are a little bit more than at the same percentage wise, but they're both well below the 67% we would see if we were living up to the budget. So one thing that has impacted that, and I've made some adjustments, is we had some estimates in there for reimbursed expense, and that was tied to historically what we were getting reimbursed for our operator that was out of the PUA, who retired, and I just didn't get that changed fast enough on our budget. And so it is a reflection. We get money reimbursed to us for what Melissa does, but because that person retired, we don't have that same amount of revenue that we have coming in, and we don't have his expense going out either.
Did they replace him?
I don't know that. I'm not sure that they did, because I think maybe they already had somebody kind of training while he was there. And then I don't know that they hired anybody after he retired. I think they were kind of already situated for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd have to visit with Nathan on how that transpired, because I don't really remember. So with that, here again is that kind of spreadsheet that we used last time, that kind of has the various kind of where we could kind of go in here and play with scenarios, rate scenarios, and see how the fund performs with that change. So I guess, is there any questions, anything as far as the fund, something you want to, haven't heard any feedback yet. You did all your studying, you don't have any questions for me?
Yes, I do, but you're not there yet.
Okay.
Were you transferred out of this, that 50,000 in 2021, is that going to be into the general fund? Now, that's for salaries and all expenses. Is that the correct amount that that will cover, or is that going to be too much or too little, or how do you know?
Well, I think we've kind of looked at where we were with personnel expenses before and kind of balanced that. That's why we moved that to 90,000 in 2022. And I realized I have it kind of changing on this spreadsheet. I hadn't got that part updated, but I think that's something that we can go back and kind of evaluate is where we are. I think considering that, especially with the utility office, I mean, they're doing billing, they're taking a lot of questions. That $50,000 probably isn't enough. But that's what we felt like we could do budget wise and make it work with water. Moving forward, we upped it to 90,000 in 2022. And that was based on looking at what we were spending out of water for when we had various salaries taken out of there compared to what we were now.
Okay, but if you don't have that operator salary now, that should compensate for part of that.
Well, that wasn't part of the expense.
So you're increasing 2022 to 90,000?
Yeah, that's what we passed, yes.
You know, and this is one that I'll have to ask, and I don't know, and I can't remember, but how does this, you remember with the PUA, we had to have that fund where we had a balance or a cushion to cover the debt, and it was a certain amount. Does this impact that? And I can't remember enough about that, but I know it was always a deal at the end of the year if we was going to be able to hit that percentage.
So the PUA probably has a debt service ratio that they have to hit.
Right, and the city has to have enough to cover that. And by doing all these transfers, will that still allow that to happen? Like where you've got 90 and then 75, and then when you've got transferred to the CIP, the 100 and 200 and all that?
Well, and I guess
I'm
I'm not sure on,
And I can't
because my understanding of
about
that is it is the PUA's responsibility to cover their debt service. Now,
But the
ultimately,
city has to have,
but ultimately that comes back to the city, but in the conversations I've had with Harold and even Greg on some of that financial stuff, I've not heard that we have to have a certain debt service ratio or anything like that.
well, it seemed like,
I would assume if the better we have our reserve, and if we can show a reserve, that probably would help the PUA's financial outlook, because it would show that the city has their water utility finances in order, and therefore that they're part of the PUA, so it would help that. That would be my assumption, but I would have to ask that question of Greg and Harold
well,
on
it seemed
that.
like we did, because it seemed like at the time Dan was always very concerned that we
Are
had
we
to have
talking
a
about the
certain
take or
percentage.
Are we talking about the take or pay, where if we don't use a certain amount of water?
No, we still have to pay. Then that's based on our previous year's usage, isn't it, our take or pay?
Well, it's based on, it's based on kind of like a 3-year usage window and based on what we anticipate we have to sell. And then it's our percentage of what that amount that we have to
Right.
sell to make our budget work. And then we get that turns into our take or pay. And it's calculated. It's not the same each month.
No,
And
it's
so
not the same each year what
Yeah,
we have to do. And Alice and this, they change, according to usage. No, I can't remember what that was, but it's something to do with the bonds. I can't remember. I just remember it was always kind of a deal with Dan that we had to have that percentage, and
Well, and like I said, if we had bonds, we would
No,
have
it
to do
wasn't,
that.
but don't we have to have something covered?
I would have to, like I said, I would have to ask Harold and Greg. I have not got that from many of the conversations that I've had.
I thought we talked about that when we first started talking about the rates, and I thought that had to do totally with the PUA and their bond indebtedness.
Yeah.
I didn't think it, because I think you brought that up before, and I think
It's strictly PUA.
that was my understanding, I thought.
I think that's something to do with our Emma
With what?
pilot. Emma,
Emma Pine?
yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking they're like 1.25%.
Well,
I know.
that all would tie back to, there again, I think that ties back to the PUAs. Are you talking about our Emma filing or PUAs, Emma filing and what we filed with?
We do one and Lewisburg does one.
Right.
for the PUA.
And there, I think with that, if we have our reserve, the better finances the better that we have our water utility finances in, it's gonna reflect better onto the PUA.
But when you talk about these transfers and that amount, how's that going to impact our individual water rates here in town? Like, what are they now? I don't know what it is.
Well, and I think that's the question of, you know, we can change those amounts. But I think with what we're doing with personnel budgeting, we probably owe the general fund some money to cover some of those costs. The water utility for the billing services, the support. I mean, just like Kirk, his oversight of the distribution side of things. He's not tied on to the treatment side, but that water utility, think of the water utility as a business, and they're borrowing people from the general fund in a sense to do some of their service. So they owe the general fund a little bit for that service.
That's for our water in town, our water service in town.
Right. The CIP is basically to save money for future projects.
Right.
And so both of those could go to zero. But I'm just saying philosophically, I think the water utility does owe the general fund money for those personnel services that are offered by people that aren't necessarily counted as water utility employees. And we probably need to think about saving for future capital projects. What those levels are then determines on what you're going to do with your rate. Because if you set this line, these two lines to zero, that changes the whole dynamic of the finances for the
But
future.
isn't that what they've always been, is zero?
You have not, there's not been very much, if not, at some point they saved some money to fund 15, but that's very little. I think we had, I can't remember what that amount, $150,000 sticks in my mind is maybe that's what we have left. Does that sound right?
115.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Well, but we still have some in Fund 15. So we basically have not done any planning for future capital projects. We've maybe
Have not had it, yeah.
we maybe have replaced water line on Hospital Drive, but to say, hey, we've got to replace 3 of these major distribution lines in this area, we don't have the money for that. If we have to if we had to do some major renovation to our water tower, we don't have the money for that. So the CIP is that the idea behind that is to start basically a piggy bank for those capital projects. Now, sitting here today, I don't know that I have project A, B, C, and D lined up for you. But that's what the water master plan is doing for us. The idea is that they're gonna come back and say, okay, here's things that you can do. Here's projects that you have older infrastructure. We know that if you do this project, you can, decrease the age of your infrastructure, increase fire flows. You can get better water, maybe better water quality because you have better water circulation through a section of town. All those things if you do this project. So that may be a project that we decide that we want to do, and we need to have some money saved back for that.
That's like a water line we're talking about, I see.
Yes.
So the
Or
figures-
even a development coming in, and so that we're trying to build that out for somebody, so that now typically that gets reimbursed as a benefit district, but you got to have the money to build it out, and that's how you do that too. So, okay.
So based on what you've got here, you've got a no increase this year, a 10% increase in 2022, and a 5% increase in 2023. With the transfer to the general fund, I noticed in 2022, you said bumped it up to 90.
Yeah, and that's what we budgeted. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't have
why?
this.
Okay. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. So based on the numbers that you have there, what's the reserve?
This is the reserve as it tracks in the BC budget. Okay.
I thought we discussed earlier in the year that we were gonna raise the water rate a certain amount. We kind of decided on what it was going to be this fall.
I
We
don't
were gonna
know,
raise
did we
it this fall.
Did we decide that? You got in here 3%. I don't like percentages when it comes to money. I like numbers.
Well, because I think initially we had talked about like doing a 7% increase or an 8% increase this year, then a 7% increase next year. And we kind of played around with those numbers, but I thought we had decided to hold off on deciding firmly what the increase needed to be because of the comprehensive plan and going, we don't know what the projects need to
It was
be.
okay for the time.
Well,
I thought
and-
we decided we would raise the rates this fall.
Well, I think there was some consensus towards that, hey, we probably need to really look at this. Right. I don't think we got to that number because the numbers that we were playing with in the spring changed because we waited 6 months to put in a rate increase. And so that means that what might have been 8 in June has to be 10 in January 1. Because we've lost that ability to account for that.
So what would 3% be? A
3%.
dollar amount, I mean, a penny amount, whatever.
Well, and I know, we've been around with this. We need to think about what we need for revenue. So if we make $2 million in revenue and we need 10% more than that, then we need to adjust our rates up 10%.
And that would be,
Well, right now, and that depends on what your, I'm gonna stop sharing here. It depends on what meter you have, what rate classification you
well,
are.
residential, that's what the majority is.
Residential, but see, they have different meter sizes.
Okay, just your
So-
average meter size, the one that's the majority in town. The one that's going
So I think-
to impact all of us when we pay our water bill.
Just a second.
I'm not tackling the laundry.
So I think what you're wanting to know is you're wanting to know what's the average increase per percentage for families.
Yeah.
Right.
So, right, so if we
Right.
raise it
So-
1%, it's gonna be this much, 2% is gonna be
Right,
this much.
like
Just to
if
get an
they say
idea.
it's gonna go up 2%, 100, or 2 cents 100, or 3 cents 100.
So-
What's this?
This is something that I did prepare the last time, and so I haven't double checked this spreadsheet. But estimating that the average water bill for residential water, the average total bill,
Right, now you.
And
have
not
that
counting
in here.
taxes.
Uh-huh.
talking water, sewer, sanitation, and stormwater was $109.
Yes, now that's in here. Okay, how much water usage is that? Like how many gallons or whatever?
And I
It
think,
says 3,400, I think, or 3,384. In that paragraph right above that chart.
yeah,
Okay, so that. would
and I
be-
think I got that by trying to get, okay, here's an average number of customers we had each month. There's a total average usage between 2016 and 2018. And I got that out to get this average usage per month.
So basically, if we increased it 10%, we'd be talking $11 per house. So
This would, looking at this, it would go up from 109.52 to 114.52.
This is just on the water.
So it goes up about $5.
okay.
Because the average water bill based on this is $50. So if you go up 10%, it's,
So basically 50 cents a percentage point.
yeah, for the average
For the
person.
average, right. So does that answer your question? 50
50
cents,
cents.
roughly 50 cents per percentage point.
So $5 higher.
Right, so if we do a 10% increase, it's 5%.
You know, that may not sound like a lot to us, but to the average person out here, when you figure out what your water bill is, and I know the girls at City Hall hear it, and I hear it, it's our water bills. The cost of, because that's not it, because you've got your sewer on there, and that impacts your sewer fee as well as your water bill. And it does on the commercial side too, because I pay a percentage every month. It's not like residential, but your commercial is based on a percentage of what you use every month. And it does add up. And you think $5 is just, isn't that much. Sometimes, yeah, it is.
Well, and
And
I'm not here to say
disputing
that
it
$5 isn't very much. What I'm here to say is, I guess I feel like my position, I have to
I know,
guide you with, hey, this is our financial situation with our water utility. Now,
and I.
if we want to go in and cut personnel, we want to cut back what maintenance we're doing to help drive down the budget, or we want to say we're not going to save for any future project. I mean, we can make all those changes and then have that be less. But I'm not sure that, I don't think that's good fiscal responsibility for running a utility.
When was the last time we raised the rate?
It went up from like 72 cents to 74 cents.
And I think I did, I looked at that amount.
We discussed it at that time, that if we raised it higher, we would have a lot more reserves than we do currently.
And I agree, you do need some reserve, but you have to figure, where's the balance between doing the right thing and being excessive? Because you know, when you raise everybody's water bill, and then the commercial side, I talk about your businesses, in order to compensate for that, they're gonna raise their prices on something else to pay that water bill. It's like you dropped a little rock in the puddle and it makes waves that go out and out and out. So it's not just doing that. And I understand needing to save for projects and reserves. But when we've not had anything transferred to that, and you just start out at 100,000 and then you go to 200,000, that's a lot. Or it is to me. I don't deal in, I deal in dollars and quarters, so it just seems like it's a lot. And we do have a lot of people on fixed income, and the one thing I hear the most is about water bills. And I'm sure if you'd ask the girls at City Hall, they can tell you that too. And I do know I asked them about, and I don't know, maybe you all do, but I do ask about the disconnect things and the fees and all that. And yes, we do have them every month, and sometimes they come in and they get paid, and sometimes it's a struggle, but they are there. And I don't know that I'm just saying there's a balance there between saving and doing the right thing for the city, but we also have to think of the city, how
So,
we're impacting them,
so if
and
you,
that's where I'm at. Okay.
if you look at the residential, commercial and industrial, which kind of really drives a lot of our usage, and they're, and because also the country club and the rural water
Well, that's
line,
minimal.
their rates are a little bit different than what the, but if you look at just what that one penny did in 2020, that meant we got less than 15,000 more dollars than what we would have gotten the year before with one penny. That's why
That's
thinking
not.
thinking about pennies doesn't get you to where you need to be,
No, it
because
doesn't.
you've gotta, yeah.
You have to start somewhere. Pennies make dollars. But,
So do we have a completion date on the water master plan?
We have a meeting set up tomorrow with them. I think they've made a lot more headway on the wastewater side. I know with the flow monitoring and the data that I've seen on that, then I think they have on the water side. I think originally that was supposed to be by the end of this year.
Who's doing that?
That's McClure. They're a consulting, engineering consulting firm. You know, go ahead.
How do you spell that?
M little c, capital C, Lure.
Because we know we need to build our reserve.
Well,
We know we need to save for projects, but the last thing we want to do is we certainly don't want to raise rates now and then turn around and have to raise rates again early next year.
no, that's not a game plan. You need to do what you're going to do. And
Well, and I think without having that master plan done, I think if we look at a decent amount that we're going to fund, because I'll be honest with you, my bet is that master plan is going to come back with more projects than we are going to be willing to fund. It just is, because
well, it's
we-
an old infrastructure.
right, we have old infrastructure, so we're gonna have to prioritize what projects we do anyway. And so if we say, you know what, we're comfortable with, we're gonna try to do $100,000 next year, maybe next year it's $75,000, and the next year we try to do 150, and then we get to 200, and that's kind of where we're gonna be. If we build that into this model, then I think that gets us a starting point, and maybe in a couple of years after we have that, and we're looking at the projects that we're doing with the master, through the master plan and all that, we say, okay, well, we've got to adjust that up. Or we feel like we need to, or maybe we can, and maybe we're able to sell more water, and we don't, you know, if we get a couple developments in and different things get going, then maybe that you don't, your volume is coming from that addition, not necessarily trying to come up with volume
Customers versus.
through, yeah.
Mhm.
And the numbers that you have in there, the transfer to the CIP fund, that's not part of the reserve, correct?
That would be,
That's over and above.
that would be over and above. So one thing you can do too is you can kind of look, if we just did this is just simplicity's sake. You could say, okay, we've got 600,000 plus this 383, you've got 983,000. Now, ideally, you've got that 600,000 spoken for different projects, but you've got,
But technically, we could use it as.
right, and maybe we get that up and we say, you know what, we're not gonna worry about that 250 in emergency. We just want 90 days worth of cash. Or maybe we kind of balance that a little bit. We said, we'll do 120 days worth of cash and no emergency reserve, knowing that we've got money in our CIP, that if we have an emergency, we just use that. So, I mean, we've got some options there.
What would you need 90 days cash for? What would project, what?
I think that's just a common financial recommendation from auditors, any financial manager I've talked to.
Have a
Is it-
recession like you did in
Right.
2010.
So as you, that way you can buffer yourself against dips, you can, as things go south, you've got a little bit of cushion. If you, I mean, now water is a little bit, but you know, say we had a major leak and we couldn't get it fixed, and we were having to do something different. People were having to buy bottled water and they just couldn't use showers or what, I mean, something wild like that, where we don't, our revenue just goes to the bottom. We've got a little room, and plus it just helps with cash flow so that you can, as you've got money going out for something, you don't have to worry about, well, do I have enough cash in here to pay for that item? If you're buying a bunch of supplies or something like that.
No, I agree, you need that, but I think you have to balance that. There's no opinion.
I know at one time, Oswani was always talked about, are they redoing their own plant?
No, I think that's yet to be determined.
I know they've had some issues with one of the schools.
I know they're kind of back
Trying
and
to borrow
forth.
money for the.
Yeah.
They've had other schools down a couple of times for the water stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, they've got, my understanding, there's some distribution challenges there, but then they also have the water treatment plant itself that has challenges too, so.
Well, water's a necessity, you have
So,
to have water, that's the bottom line.
so any thoughts?
Maybe just a slight increase in January. Until we see what the master plan says. And then do something the following January. Because I don't think we should just do nothing, we're gonna be having this conversation.
No, you can't just do nothing because the cost of the chemicals and everything that are going up, and that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Processing it, so you have to pay for it.
I don't want to raise it twice next year.
No,
I'm gonna put this at 92. so it's
twice
So
is
that's the problem, if we don't do much now.
Right,
then
Yeah.
we're gonna be on the
Right.
well, and I think originally,
again next year.
Right,
You
I
have
think-
to make a reasonable decision.
right, I think earlier this year when we were talking about it, we talked about needing a total of around 15%, and that's why we were talking about possibly 8
Yes.
and 7, and then 7.5, 7.5, and then because we
You
didn't
mean
do anything,
cents?
I'd hate to do a little and not really make it have much of an impact, and then turn around and come with a much larger increase in 2022.
Right.
But
We know we're gonna have to do something. We talked about this 6, 8 months ago, and,
I don't think did we raise them last year?
Not
Well,
really.
that's
We did,
I think we were trying to give people some time.
yeah.
Things
Right.
were
And
so
then we knew it would be
crazy because of COVID.
because of COVID and everything, and we did not do anything last year. I didn't think we did. Not sure if they're better.
I just hate to see us go so small, but we're end up doing it right
Yeah.
back again. Because then people say,
well,
well, you just raised them last year.
and that's my concern too, is if we we do too small of an increase now, then the next increase is gonna have to be
Larger.
Big.
quite a bit larger than this increase.
It's sooner than we want to do that. Yeah.
Well, something that we could do, this is just a suggestion, we do something like 10% now, or for January 1. And know that, unfortunately, we'll have to have this conversation again next year. We should have all the CIP information back, we should have all that. And then that's something where maybe we could look at, if we feel like we still need another 5 or whatever, but maybe we could do 2.5 and 2.5. We could kind of gives us we get a little bit of room this year, and then we know that next year we're going to be at it. But then also, if we pass something for next year, we could say, okay, this is a 2-year rate. Here's what it's going to be this year. Here's what it's going to be next year. And we don't have to talk about it for a couple of years.
I don't think you're ever gonna be able to go.
Well, I think you kind of, like I said, you work through with your rate to give yourself, because honestly, you put that in there, you're never really, it's often, it's hard to get the actual that you think you're gonna generate. And what happens typically is, what I've kind of seen play out is you raise that rate and then people are a little more conscious about what they do with their water. And so their usage goes down. And so we sell less water. So we gotta think about, and
So I said it's balance.
you get to, at some point, you try to find that true cost of water, but it may take a little while to get to that.
So how much are we talking about? I mean, so a family of 5, their water bill is $109 a month.
Well, and I don't know that that's a family of 5. It's the average residential.
Okay.
Right. So we're talking roughly an average of 50 cents per 1%. So if we do a 10% increase, we're talking about a $5 water bill increase
Per month.
per month.
Well, mine is just.
Is there any way you could do $2.50 and then 6 months later do another $2.50?
I mean, you can, but
More unhappy.
and you also lose, just like us, we waited a little bit, you lose that time that you would have had that rate in place. So even though you're still, over the last year, you increased it 10%, you only had it at that level for 6 months versus 12
I
months.
think a smaller increase now hurts us more in the long run if we set up for a smaller increase in January.
I think the public realizes that.
And I think that an increase once a year is probably enough. For most people.
Right, and that's what I don't want to do. I'd rather do a larger increase in January 1, not that I want a larger increase, but I'd rather do a larger increase January 1 than have to do a small increase and then turn around and say, oh, well, maybe we'll do another increase 6 months later.
Yeah. Do we still have something where seniors get a reduced rate or? Didn't they used to get a reduced
there's
rate on
only-
their water or
There's only
something?
like 30 people on that.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, there's only like, because we talked about that last time,
with
there's
the
only like
sanitation.
28, 29 people
Yeah.
on that program.
I mean, how many
There's a lot.
people, how many other people don't know about it? I mean, how do we advertise that? So anybody that's elderly moving into Paola wouldn't know about it.
They said the utilities, I'm sure that they're told about it. If they moved to Paola and said that new utilities, that's probably what we tell them, but as far as when they get to that point, I don't know.
The utility, who would tell
When you come and set up the water,
them? Okay.
Yeah, Marcia and Ann tell me. But don't that impact your sewer rate too? Is it your sewer percentage of your water? It used to be, I don't know how they do it now.
it is, you know.
Like they use
It's
2
your
months, 2 months water bill determined, and that's residential only, not commercial. Residential, the water usage is, your sewer rate's determined on your water usage. And they do it in the winter months, so you're not charged, you know, if you're using a lot of water. They used it January, February, or February, March.
January, February.
So your
Yeah,
water
they-
usage is normally a lot lower in those 2 months. And that's, so you know, this will impact that sewer rate on your bill too.
Yeah.
Well, we're not talking about changing the rate of the sewer.
No.
I know, but if your water goes up,
No,
It's just-
it's just your
Yeah.
consumption. So if you use 1,000 gallons of water, they're gonna assume that you used 1,000 gallons of sewer, and they use that as your,
your sewer.
the rate is just taking.
Well, I
into
always
account-
thought
percentage of your
I thought they
usage.
used the percentage of the water is what,
I think they do
Determine
use
the
a
sewer.
percentage of the usage, not the rate.
not the rate.
Yeah, so, yeah, the sewer would have, like, we charge 74 cents per 100 gallon for water. This, I can't remember what the sewer is. It's
My
like,
sewer's almost as much as my water's.
Commercial, yeah.
the big-
No, this is my whole bill.
you got
I
a,
didn't bring the water, but nobody wants to see that.
you got a sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
It was like paying on the national debt. Laundry prices will have to increase.
Because that's what you've got figured in right now, is you've got a 10% increase in January 1, 2022, and then a 5% increase in 2023.
Yeah, and we're not transferring, by this, we're not transferring anything into the CIP until 2020.
Until, okay, you just changed that, didn't you?
I changed these numbers here just to reflect.
Okay, but no,
what
this
it was.
was transferred to 2022.
Right, but he's got a different one. He's got a
Okay.
This is
You
updated.
changed it up there.
Right. So he
Yeah,
doesn't show.
I updated it.
He only includes the 2024, this 200,000 right there, is what we start, so these don't have.
So these two don't happen. Oh, Lord, I could get into this.
Well, one man talking.
That's right. Let me know. I will be here to discuss.
I'm wasting my time.
Well, I think we need to go ahead and do something. It's fine.
Well, so do we want to, do you want me to get a ordinance prepared for, what do we want to, just one for January 1?
Yeah.
At 10%?
Don't put numbers. Don't, I hate it when you. put
$5.
Well, I'm not, I won't, listen, it won't be, I will use 10%, I will add 10% onto the 74 cents, so it'll be like 81 cents,
Right.
something,
Well, 10% is 74.
right,
7.4.
right, and so 7.4 to 74, that's 81 something, right?
Well, and I think that makes the most sense, and then that gives us next year to look at the master plan and figure out where we are at the end of the year, by this time next year, we'll have a much better idea of where we are, determine if we need to do 5%.
Then that comes to council and complaint.
You're not allowed.
Only Zoom. Only Zoom.
Only Zoom.
Right.
So he can actually call during that time.
You can email us all the complaints you want.
Oh, thank you.
Any other, okay, I think I should be able to have that ready by,
Well, and the good thing about January is it's a low usage month, so it'll help. It's not like raising it 10% in July.
It's not like the watering yard.
Right.
Not that I do anyway. So I don't have to know. Okay. I guess I'm done. I stacked up my papers. Are you done?
I was,
If you're not done, I'm sorry to tell you.
apparently we're done. We'll go on to the council meeting items. I think first thing is we have a final plat for Calico Court, and Randy's gonna talk through that.
Oh, good. Is that out there by Sundance too?
It is.
I had someone today talking about it.
Is that where that is?
So this right here is the Sundance Apartments, and this over here would be Indian Hills. And this is Sundance Drive.
You don't mean Indian Hills.
Not Indian
Timber
Hills.
Ridge.
Timber, well, no,
Sundance
Timber Ridge
too.
is on.
Oh, Sundance one then? Which one's one by the police station? Police station, apartments?
Oh, that's Sundance one.
Okay, Sundance one.
Well, this is
Indian
across
Hills.
from the, where he,
Storage.
George.
Yes,
uh-huh.
yes, and this is Sundance Drive.
Okay.
Yes, so the entire lot was about 2.8 acres. It's zoned as thoroughfare access, so that allows for commercial and residential. These 4 lots right here, he's planning on residential. They meet the minimum requirement of 8,500 square feet. I think the smallest was right under 12,000, so that exceeds that. For lot 1, the developer doesn't have any plans, definite plans right now. But for the size and for the zoning, it's pretty wide open. He can do a lot with it. So he left a pretty clean slate there for him.
He could do apartments or.
He could, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Is Rob developing this or is
Yes,
Rob is going
Yes.
to?
yes, like seed properties.
Good.
So the developer will be doing a sewer line extension. Kurt, our public director, has reviewed where the placement materials and sizing, and we have the plans there to send off to Wilson Company for review, but they are within the 25-foot build line and 2-foot utility easement that goes right here. 25-foot build line all around as well as required 2-foot utility easement. The planning commission did recommend approval at their council meeting, and other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Any questions?
I'm glad to see that developing.
Yeah.
The runoff on that, that's kind of a hill up.
It is kind of a hill. I pulled up the flood map, and actually it's completely, all this is completely out of the flood zone. So,
I was just thinking the railroad tracks, so about the water running down.
but if you can develop this as a commercial lot, you will have to do a site plan and a drainage study and everything like that before you can go. These would just be residential lots.
You know that real big dip in front of Sundance one that looks like there should be a pond there?
Okay.
Where would that be?
I am not sure because it doesn't show their property on it.
Well, it's just right in front of the Sundance one.
Right
It was
behind
supposed
where
to
that
be a
barn
drainage
is.
pond.
Is it right
Retention
behind the
pond.
A
barn?
retention pond, yeah.
Is it right behind the barn?
No, it's right on the road. It's right, Sundance one sits here and it's right down here. You
One of
would,
them is actually for Indian Hills.
no, this is right in front of Sundance one.
That's the one up at the police station.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it on the Google Maps. It's probably just a retention.
Yeah.
To handle their stormwater.
I like the storage sheds you built out there.
He did a nice job, didn't
Yeah, I
he?
didn't think I would like it, but I thought, gee, could put some more in there.
That puts more lighting along there too. That's dark when you walk
Yeah,
out there.
Yeah.
Really dark.
there's a lot of foot traffic through there.
Yes, there is.
He didn't say what price range these homes would be.
You did not.
They'll sell whatever price range they are.
200,000.
Yeah, you can buy it.
That's about a normal one there.
The prior, and those who can buy them.
There's,
Could be.
Any other questions on that? Other thing, KGS franchise, Lee and I met, city attorney did tell whether or not I met, to clarify that. Last week, we kind of discussed it, and I sent a correspondence to the Kansas Gas Service, and had a couple of emails back and forth, and still waiting on a return of my last email. Main thing is that I'm trying to get clarified is some of the language regarding the usage of our right of way. It's not that I want to limit their usage, but I think we should be able to kind of approve, at least being able to see plans and say, yes, we've signed off on that versus they just do what they want. So we're kind of working through that.
Who is this?
Kansas Gas Service.
Okay.
So I don't know if we'll have that done by Tuesday, but if not, it'll probably be on the first meeting. So. That's, well, and we'll put the water rate on there. Any questions on those items? I wanted to give a little bit of update on kind of half-cent sales tax spending kind of plan that we talked about at the last special meeting. I talked on the pool project, I talked to Confluence, and they're the ones that we kind of worked with to kind of get some of the preliminary kind of numbers that we had. And I kind of told them, I said, okay, here's what we're looking at. Here's the dollar amount. We want to make sure that we've got something for everybody. And so they're working on kind of refining what their proposal would look like. And they kind of then also kind of lining out what the next steps would be to get the project going. I met with another group of Confluence, with Matt Carlisle from Confluence, and discussed the ball fields. He's Confluence, the way I understand that, we can do things differently, but they can kind of put together a design team that would do all that and prepare things for bidding for construction. So he's in the process of kind of putting together like, okay, who they might use for different components of that design step, and then developing kind of a scope of work that would be, is what that team would do. And so we can have that to look at.
I have a question
Yes.
on confluence. We hired them to do our comp plan. And I wasn't here when I don't know how much it is that we're paying them. And so was it an hourly rate or a total rate or?
We did that contract, I think, in February of this year.
Okay.
And I think it's $148,500. And that was for the comp plan, but we also requested a little additional work because we knew we had this half-cent sales tax. We requested kind of an additional focus on kind of parks and park development. And we also had additional focus on the downtown area. So that's why that cost is a little higher than some comp plans, because we asked for a little bit more. And out of that, that's where they've helped us with the initial kind of conceptual plan for Wallace Park and some of the follow-up stuff that they've done and the stuff that we talked about last on the 28th. And so that's where conflicts kind of comes in.
But they've spent so much time on the ball fields and the swimming pool and all that. It's
The swimming pool,
It's got to cut into the amount that, what else they're doing.
They knew that, that's why that cost was higher than a normal comp plan. And that was conversations that we had when we developed that scope of work for them. So that's been the plan all along for them to help us with that stuff. The pool was something that we did a separate little contract with them and WTI to get us some more specific information on the pool. Because we didn't really have that
That was separate
full
money.
component. Yes,
How
that was,
much?
it was less than $10,000. And they come out, they did a full site evaluation, basically assessment of like all of our current kind of infrastructure. They'd come up with cost estimates of what it would take to kind of do that maintenance rehabilitation, and then they're helping us through kind of this amenities and pool planning side of things too. So
They've got quite a few people that have done different things for it.
yeah,
Different people specialize in different things.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going on record that I still am not in favor of building the baseball fields in Wallace Park in the floodplain. I just think that by the time you contact FEMA and it's going to take a long time. It isn't going to be something that's going to happen overnight. You have to get permits. They're going to have to come in and do all the checking. Anyway, I thought the other day, I woke up and I thought, why don't we look at building 2 baseball fields where the old Paola Armory used to be? You drive into the Paola, into the Wallace Park, to the left is where the old Paola Armory was. There's all that land down there. Yes, it would have to be brought up and flattened and all that, but it would be I think if there's enough room there, it might be a lovely spot for 2 baseball fields. That land will never be used. It's in Wallace Park. The only time they ever use it's for an Easter egg hunt.
Where's that at?
The minute you go in the gate, if you go backwards rather than go completely around, the old armory set within.
There's a concrete
Yeah.
Concrete slab there.
That's where the old armory.
So up on top of the
Yeah.
hill.
Yeah, and it's on high ground and it's got a lovely view and you'd have plenty of room there for parking and we could use the Wallace Park where the baseball fields are now for soccer and other things.
I don't think there's enough room there.
I don't know, we'd have to look
I don't
into
think
it.
so.
We'd have to look into it. I don't know. It's just, it was a
Took the
thought.
road and half the park.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any parking or anything up there.
Look, there's not gonna be much parking in Wallace Park either, down by the baseball fields.
You got all kinds of places you can make parking.
I can definitely have Matt look at that as far as spacing wise, but
I don't know how many acres, I don't know. Around there. It was just a thought, it's in Wallace Park. It's high ground.
And there's a
Right on
big
that
creek that
big
goes
creek.
right by it too.
It's way down at the bottom.
that floods.
If we're not, where we're looking at in the fields now, if it's not in the floodplain technically, you don't have to get FEMA involved.
It
Well-
is in the floodplain.
There's two different things. And I'm not sure that I have, there's floodplain and floodway. I think some of that is, a lot of that is in, there's a lot of floodplain that was in. That doesn't require as much as if you're doing the floodway.
Because I
If you're
think
doing work
that's
in the
why-
floodway, like some of those further, the fields further south are more in the, are likely to be in the floodway. And so those would be harder to, those might take a little bit more, depending on what we're doing, to renovate, just because of that process.
If I remember correctly, whatever the difference is why the concession stand where the old Legion field is so much, now you can't tell, but they could do improvements to it versus the down by the softball fields.
Right.
The softball field, people couldn't really do anything because they were in the flood, whichever. Baseball was not.
There's a floodplain, the floodplain boundary. And it goes up right in front of the swimming pool and curves down a little bit and, but it's there and it would have to be looked at.
And the other site that you were talking about, you wouldn't have your concession stand up there, you wouldn't have restrooms up there, you wouldn't have any of that stuff unless you doubled down on expenses.
Well, it did, the plan that was presented did include improvements to the concession stand.
No, I'm talking about it.
Yeah, up there too.
Yeah,
And
but there was water there and sewer when the armory was there, so it's gotta be around there somewhere.
well, I know there's water.
Just kind of try to estimate some space up there. I think that would be tight, just
It might be.
a rough, because I think it's tight where we have it and how he did it to kind of preserve the Legion building and all that, and so. Anyway, I did also talk to Greg Bernberg with Raymond James on kind of financing side of that whole thing. And talked about thinking about issuing some temporary notes. We would kind of get us started on the project. And then at a later time, we would issue the money to bond that. But that would allow us to kind of get started on projects and get to the point where we really knew what that final dollar amount was going to be, rather than, we kind of talked to making sure we had some flexibility with that. Talking with him, kind of temporary notes, you can go up to 4 years. He was thinking, if you do like 2 years, that gives you plenty of time. We'd have to kind of refine what that dollar amount, because if we think we're going to spend 7.5 at the end of everything, we don't necessarily need to get 7.5 million of temporary notes. We may only need 2 million for the temporary.
Right, just to get started.
Just to get started. So we'd have to kind of get that refined. With that, he talked about, and he reached out to Ray Carson for us, and I've got a meeting with her on Friday or tomorrow, one of these days, to talk about doing project authorization, resolution or resolutions for each of those projects, so the pool, the dam, and the ball field. And that basically allows us to we can start these projects, and we know that we've got this note money that we can we can start in a sense accumulating costs without necessarily going against our cash basis of like, hey, we did a contract for $200,000, we don't have that $200,000. We can issue notes on that. So that's how we're gonna cover that. So we're gonna talk through that. That may be something that we have ready by Tuesday's meeting. I'm not sure where Mary's at on that. The other thing would be is the authorization to issue notes. I don't know if you remember when we refinanced those one bonds, we came in and we basically authorized Mary and Greg to start working on that bond issuance. And then as we kind of felt like, okay, this is gonna work, let's go. That basically would be the same thing that we would do. So that way we have a little bit of flexibility. So as we get things in place, we can kind of.
Was there further clarification on my question about what we have to spend the money on if we have to designate, if we do temporary notes versus bonds? Do we have to designate so much to, or is it just for the overall project, or so much for the pool and so much for ball fields?
That'll be a question I have for Mary,
Okay.
because that'll be her knowing that.
Okay, because my hope would be we could say, so much up to anything over, I don't know, gets worded, but I just want to make sure we're able to, as fees change and we can move money around as we need to.
Well, I'm going on record that I would like to see us go ahead with the swimming pool and figure out how much we're gonna spend there and vote on it and get it started, so it'll be done by the summertime. But as far as voting on it, any money for any other thing, I would like to see us wait until after the vote for the rec commission. And that's just 27 days away. And then we'll have some new city council people in here. So, I mean, I hope we're not planning on doing anything, voting on anything in the next 27 days till after the election.
Well, this would be, the things that I'm talking about is basically authorizes us to incur expenses for these projects and being able to pay for them with proceeds for the half-cent sales tax. That's kind of that project authorization resolution. That's my understanding of what that does. The other thing, the authorization to issue notes would be the ability to, as the projects get more defined and are ready to issue notes, that sets up that work that they can be working on, so that when we say, okay, we're ready to issue notes, we can do it and we're not 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever to a meeting before we can do that.
Don't we have to vote on each separate?
We don't, there is.
The phase that where we spend our money?
There is no requirement to vote on where we spend that money. Now, what you will have to vote on is when we get a contract in for, we do bids or whatever, and we got, here's what it's going to take $2 million to build the baseball field. You will make a vote then, but you wouldn't necessarily make a vote. We don't necessarily have to have a vote to say we're doing 3.5 at the pool and we're doing 5 at the ball field.
Who decides that if we don't vote on it?
Well, that's the consensus of here, and then I take that direction and say, okay, Confluence or whoever, our budget is 3.5 at the pool. What can we get from 3.5 at the pool? And they build that project for us.
And I can understand you saying that you don't want to vote on anything regarding the ball fields until the rec commission vote happens. I guess my main concern there is the voters could say no to the rec commission. And it doesn't matter whether we have a rec commission or not. We know we need to work on the ball fields.
Yeah.
We haven't done any work down there for years.
We still have to address that issue.
And the nice thing about it is the way it's drawn up and what we've been discussing so far is it's not just ball fields. It's soccer fields, it's park
It's everything.
improvements, it's flag.
Winter projects. Yeah, I know that.
And so, like I said, I understand, because we had a meeting with the Rotary Club to talk about the rec commission, and I'm pretty confident it's gonna pass. I think everybody that hears about it, I think it's time for it. But if it doesn't pass, we still have to, we know we have to upgrade the pool.
Yeah.
We know we've got a lot of work to do at the pool. We know we've got other work to do in the other park areas. And
And the sales tax is already gonna come in.
right, so what, regardless, even if the rec commission had never come up and we weren't even adding that to the ballot this year, we've still got to decide how to spend that money and what to do with the parks. And I think everything we've been talking about, not initially when we talked about it, was the fourplex on different property and paying for different property. That was like $8 million or something like that. And I think with the figure that we have now, 3.9,
Yeah.
Somewhere
3.9 would be
around
the
there.
two fields.
I
and
think
renovate
that's,
five.
I think that's a good compromise. It allows us to save Wallace Drive. We're moving it north of Wallace Drive, so we're not worried about flooding, and we're still gonna be doing other work to the other fields. So my personal opinion is I don't know that it matters whether we have the rec commission or not. I know some
No,
people.
I don't
some
think it
people may
does,
look at that.
other than we would eventually have somebody that would be able to organize and follow through on the running of the,
Right.
We're gonna
Facility.
have to address that issue.
Right.
But that's gonna
but
be-
that's down the
But
road.
honestly, that even if,
That's gonna
like
be
we've talked
2023.
in the past, and that's 2023 before that really
Right.
gets.
And I'm really trying hard to make sure everybody understands and we're not confusing the issue, because even if we had a rec commission now, the rec commission and the rec director wouldn't be making decisions on where to spend the sales tax. That
Right.
rests with us, and I understand that it's gonna help having somebody in charge of that and being able to say, okay, we're much more organized now, we've got everything under one roof, but that money still gets divvied up here, and we still decide how to spend that. It really doesn't have anything to do with the rec commission at all.
Well, and I haven't talked to a whole lot of people specifically about the projects in regards to how they feel it relates to the vote on the commission. But I think, just like I said before, they will have more confidence if we have an idea of what we're doing with this now. Why, I don't know that people, I think they want to know what we're gonna do with the money. They've been waiting for a long time. Yeah.
Well, and it really shows a good commitment from us too, saying, hey, we know we've got work to do, and we know we're gonna put money in.
Well, and the good thing about doing this, the notice thing, is it doesn't say we have to do this specifically right here, exactly like this. It says this is what we're wanting to use it
Or
for.
people are wanting to see some dirt broken, some stuff being done. Because this was actually passed almost 3 years ago.
Well, and I think it's a good use if we do the temporary notes, so we can get started early on, and then, like we said, only bond half of it, or a little more than half. And then that way we're doing a combination of bonds and cash.
Well, and I can't remember when the school district did all of their stuff, but it's been a while since there's been a big project in town, besides the jail and the business. Nobody's excited about jail. But this is something for the community, the first thing for the community in a while. So I think,
For all ages.
right, for everybody. So I think it'll be well received.
I think so too.
And for several different divisions.
Uh-huh.
People like to see things happening. That's why people ask me all the time about the project.
I know.
I know.
Yeah.
You want to know when it's going to start.
And that's one thing with both on the pool and the baseball side of talk, knowing that I think we can do some of that pool stuff. Like if we're building a splash pad, it may not be done by the time the pool's open, but it might be done before the pool's closed. And then if we do those, we've talked about those kind of shallow end features. That may be something that doesn't get put in next year, but it gets put in, it becomes a fall project for next year and gets done then. So we talked about kind of making sure we have continuity of service so we can still keep the pool open. If they're building a spot on the outside, we can still have the pool open. Same thing with the ball fields. It may be that they start on the two turf fields first. We lose that one field for the year, but everything else stays kind of the same. And then when they get through their spring season, their summer season, then we can say, okay, well, if you need practice space or whatever, you're using the new fields, but we're going to start working that here. So trying to make sure that we have it phased so that we don't end up with, we don't have a pool, we don't have ball fields all summer long. So. Any other questions on that? Just real quick, comp plan. We had an advisory committee meeting yesterday. They're gonna be, we covered kind of the vision statement and some guiding principles of using that to develop what they're going to use to develop the full plan. And there was a lot of good feedback, I felt like, at that meeting from the advisory committee. And so they're going to go back and refine that a little bit before they really dive into each of the sections. But they'll be working on that. They also presented the first kind of land use map that we saw. And they basically, I don't know if you remember from that one presentation where they had kind of 3 sections of town. And they really just kind of looked and said, okay, we're going to use all 3 of these boundaries. So it's a very wide, all-encompassing land use map, but it's probably not bad for thinking when we're trying to think 20, 30 years down the road. It seems like there was something else I was going to say about that.
There's that one meeting on that's
When did you have this meeting?
That was Monday. The advisory committee that is made up of Randy and I and Lee serves on that. And then we have like 7 or 8 community members that are part of that committee. Yeah, they're working on, they'll kind of update that timeline. I think they still have the end of this year, first part of January as their target. That moved. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about. Housing needs assessment. That's something else that they're looking at. They're going to do, as they kind of dug into some of the housing stuff. I think it was Abby actually who kind of like, hey, she kept seeing this thing popping up and like, hey, you need to have this done if you're going to be qualified for some potential grant money and being able to do different things like the Rural Housing Incentive District, RHID. We had to have that housing needs assessment done. So they're incorporating that into this project. And so they're going to be working on that in the next few months to get that kind of included.
and I'll be able to drive around and stuff.
Yeah.
So if anybody's freaked out.
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't know if it'll be an orange confluence card, but
Anybody else taking pictures and put on.
yeah.
Where they recommend like for housing, what do they show here?
Well, they have, I think, 3 or 4 levels of housing, depending on whether it's kind of just normal, what I would say residential housing. They had kind of duplex type of zones. They had zones of kind of for multifamily apartment type. And then they also had a state, so like bigger lots and places where maybe it didn't make sense to put in, small lot housing development, but maybe, multi-acre plots. They had some of that kind of zoning, but they had a lot of that. Most of that north of us was some sort of housing. And then they had some commercial stuff around 68, 169. So.
I wish we would find somebody with an Ironville lots in town. I've been around those Swami, they've got a lot of little houses, one single family going up on their infill lots over there. And I'm thinking, we need that. But they do. I've been surprised how many they have. And I don't know who's doing that. I don't know who's doing it, but we do. We have infill lots and we need.
Yep.
Has anyone been out by Applewood lately?
Yeah.
You should go out there and look. They're just about ready. I think within a week, they're going to move the residents from the middle building, big building, up to the one. Very nice. They have done an excellent job, but now they're tearing out all the parking lot. Trying to get in and out of there is a challenge. I had my people hop the ditch and get in at the rate we're going. Because
The temporary bridge.
we just about need that. I'm not kidding you. They're saying now we'll meet you at the mailbox, and that's not where we are. But they're doing a very nice job, and they are starting to do some of it there, but they're taking off all the balconies. And I want to go in, I'm going to go in and look at the insides of them, and they're very nice. They have really done a nice job there, so I'm excited for the residents that are moving up there, and getting a nice new home. They're putting in dishwashers and everything, they're just delighted. And so, yeah, it is exciting to see that happening. It's
Well,
needed too.
if you- I mean, that Hidden Meadows stuff is taking off.
I have a lot of people ask me about that, even from over at Timber Ridge, who wanting to know what's going on. Yeah. So it's nice to see things happen.
I've got two different versions of the same thing. If you're interested, K68 expansion, they're having a public meeting in Lewisburg on the 14th of October. So if you're interested, let me know. Just in case we get a quorum that goes, at least we can post it as a meeting, even though it's not really our meeting, but
Isn't that just for around the side or no, they're moving it over? They're out
I
by
think a
Somerset Road.
lot of what they're talking about is more towards Lewisburg,
Mhm.
but I know, well, you were part of that same conversation, everybody at the Rotary, we were kind of talking about, really be interesting to know what exactly they're talking about, because there's been so many, the plan has been out there and what part of that plan they're trying to do.
And it looks like they're moving all of the utilities, all of them.
Okay.
That's what it appears, and that's why we talked that it would be nice to see what the plan is, because I think initially the plan is just that section right by Lewisburg and right by the side of the.
Right, for this side
But
of
it
it.
looks like they're moving utilities all.
I haven't noticed that, but when I read the card like this, it sounds like, and when I read the paper, it's gonna be kind of around the cider mill. And then the rest of it, I thought was gonna be over the Lewisburg.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see the plan.
Oh, I used 311. They had, yeah, 68 otherwise, but I used 311.
I was gonna ask too, would it be possible to reach out to the developer, have them mow along Hedge Lane? That's looking really bad.
Well,
The
so
whole
is
section of Hedge Lane, it's pretty overgrown right there by the curb on that developer side.
Pearl Street out there by,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they had somebody from my father's house out there the other day chopping some of those weeds because they couldn't see to get out onto Pearl. And they did, they had one of the residents from out there chopping the weeds.
well, I just thought I'd mention that, because I know we've had conversations with Vista on personal property, and keeping that mowed. It would be nice to.
I understand they're gonna be opening here in November, first part. A lady that was hired there, one of the nurses was telling me that. Sunday evening, I think. She's excited about it.
So, if I may, the low income stuff, the infill lots, if you go over to Osawatomie, go to Sonic,
Uh-huh.
just south of the Sonic, a half a block, there's two little new houses and one rehab right there. It's easy to find, easy to get to, as opposed to trying to direct you to.
But you know what?
around.
Over there by Loma Vista, they've got one going in and just different places in town. And I'm thinking.
Yeah, but there's three of them, one old
Right
house
there,
in rehab and two new little houses right there.
Do you know
south of
who's
Sonic.
doing that, Alan?
Huh?
Do you know who's doing that?
No, that's just one of my lunch spots.
You know Sawatomie?
Yeah,
You don't actually know.
if it's on the way to Garnett and it's noon, I'm gonna get lunch in Osawatomie.
Why are you going to Garnett?
Why not? I got clients down there, but I'm just telling you that that's a
Doesn't
decent place to
everything?
go look at those new,
south of the Sonic.
yeah, just south of the Sonic.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'd say if you just go over by Loma Vista, there's one over there. And there's one if you go on up, I can't remember what street it's on, up in there, and I'm thinking, I wonder what this is about, but I think this is what we need.
There's a couple of builders over there that are buying old houses and fixing them.
These aren't old, these are infill.
Yeah, two of them are new and one's
Uh-huh.
a rehab.
Yeah.
It is good seeing them fix up some of the older homes.
But
around
it
town, too.
is, I'm happy for them, yeah.
They're attractive.
Yes, they are. They're doing a nice job with them. But I have been noticing that, thinking,
Would that area have been in that flood, or is it not far back enough?
no, it's.
No,
That's
No, it's not far
It
enough.
it didn't get past,
It's on
it
this.
didn't get
side.
past Pacific, did it?
No, it got
Yeah.
into that housing development a
Loma
little
Vista.
bit.
A little bit.
Right,
but it
yeah,
died
Loma
down.
Vista, and all the houses, I can't remember what
No,
street
it was
it is, but the
apartments.
houses along
They
the,
moved on.
Yeah,
It was a
they're
problem.
pretty south end.
It was apartments they wiped out. They did not rebuild. Yeah, all those apartments were ruined on the other side of this. But anyway, I've been watching that with interest and thinking, this is nice.
There's been a little more activity, at least rehabs around here, not brand new builds,
are.
but there have been more.
And they are still doing it down on the west side because when they pull in the dumpster, I think, okay.
Which is nice to see.
Yes, it is. But I know.
still they're
we
going
have
as fast as
some
they're
more.
going on the market. though.
Oh, yeah.
There's what?
They're selling as fast as they're going on the market.
I think
Yeah.
that,
They
what
are.
was it, 3 or 4 days was the average or something?
Yeah.
Very quick.
If it's on the market more than 2 weeks, it's overpriced. That's my take.
Or
on
needs
it.
work.
It needs
Yeah,
something, yeah.
yeah.
Anything else?
I'm done.
That's all
Are
I
you
got.
done? I was leaving a while ago. I was done.